Before Pixar polished animation into family-friendly perfection, there was a stranger, wilder era. An era when animated films could be genuinely unsettling, dark, surreal, and utterly fearless. These weren't cartoons designed by corporate committees. They were fever dreams, passion projects, and artistic experiments that somehow made it to your local video store. Tucked away in the foreign film section, or hidden among the sci-fi and cult classics, were VHS boxes with unsettling artwork and cryptic titles. Films that proved animation wasn't just for kids. It was a medium for philosophical explorations, violent allegories, and disturbing nightmares. From post-apocalyptic wizards battling mutants to harrowing tales of abandoned animals facing brutal realities, these films pushed animation into territories most studios wouldn't dare touch. These are the strangest, darkest animated films that once lurked on the video store shelf, and they haven't lost their power to unsettle. Wizards, 1977. It arrives like a transmission from the far edge of 1970s counterculture, a post-apocalyptic fantasy that treats animation as a weapon rather than an escape. In a future rebuilt after nuclear annihilation, magic has returned, and two wizard brothers stand on opposite sides of a new world. One embraces nature, mysticism, and survival. The other resurrects fascist ideology, weaponizing propaganda to control armies of mutants. Ralph Bakshi uses fantasy not for comfort, but confrontation. The visual style refuses stability. Hand-drawn characters collide with rotoscoped movement, psychedelic landscapes bleed into stark realism, and archival World War II footage is used without softening or metaphor. When the villain projects Nazi rallies to inspire his forces, Bakshi collapses the distance between fantasy and history, forcing the audience to recognize how easily ideology mutates and survives. Mark Hamill, voicing the hero's idealistic ally just before Star Wars, brings sincerity to a film that could otherwise drift into satire. At barely 80 minutes, it moves fast but carries heavy weight. Ecological collapse, authoritarianism, and cultural decay all sit beneath the surface, culminating in an ending that rejects heroic spectacle in favor of blunt pragmatism. That choice angered some audiences and thrilled others. This wasn't made for mass appeal. It played grindhouses and college theaters, finding viewers who wanted animation to provoke rather than reassure. Messy, political, and fiercely individual, it remains one of the most uncompromising animated films of its era, and still feels dangerous decades later. Rock and Rule, 1983. It was an all-in gamble, a fully animated rock opera aimed at an audience no one could quite define. Set in a post-apocalyptic future populated by humanoid animals, the story centers on a washed-up rock star who believes the perfect voice can open a gateway to something ancient and demonic. The pitch alone was risky. The execution was fearless. The animation showcases Nelvana operating at full capacity. Characters move with fluid confidence. Concert sequences pulse with rhythm and scale, and neon-drenched cityscapes feel alive with decay and excess. Don Franks delivers operatic menace as Mach, while Susan Roman grounds the film emotionally, giving the spectacle something human to latch onto. What truly sets it apart is the music. This isn't background decoration. Every song advances character or theme. Debbie Harry's Angel's Song anchors the film with genuine vulnerability, while contributions from Cheap Trick, Iggy Pop, Lou Reed, and Earth, Wind and Fire give it a credibility most animated musicals never approach. The failure wasn't creative, it was contextual. Released with minimal support and crushed by larger blockbusters, it disappeared almost instantly. It found its audience later, drifting through late-night cable and home video, where viewers stumbled onto something that didn't resemble anything else on the shelf. Not quite forgotten, not quite canonized, it exists in a strange limbo. A bold artifact of a moment, when animation briefly reached for the impossible and paid the price. Sorcerer's Apprentice, 1978. This version of the familiar story strips away whimsy entirely, reframing a familiar tale as a warning rather than a joke. The Apprentice becomes an everyman figure, the Sorcerer a stand-in for unchecked progress, and the spell itself a metaphor for systems humanity builds without understanding their consequences. Bruno Bozzetto approaches the material with a satirist's eye and a philosopher's patience. The animation begins grounded and recognizable, then fractures as control slips away. Figures distort, environments dissolve. By the climax, narrative gives way to abstraction, visual noise overtaking form as the apprentice is swallowed by the very efficiency he sought. The environmental subtext is unmistakable. One solution creates another problem, which multiplies again and again. What starts as labor-saving magic becomes exponential disaster. Bozzetto repurposes Paul Ducas's iconic score not for playful escalation, but for mounting dread, allowing familiarity to curdle into menace. Where Fantasia offered charming chaos and safe resolution, this interpretation refuses comfort. It suggests that once certain forces are unleashed, automation, industrialization, technological dependence, there may be no sorcerer powerful enough to clean up the mess. Rarely screened outside Europe in academic circles, it remains a stark example of how changing tone can transform a well-worn story into something urgently modern. The Time Masters, 1982. A young boy is stranded alone on a hostile alien world, his parents dead, his only lifeline a radio connection to a rescue crew racing to reach him. But the planet orbits a black hole, where time itself becomes an enemy. As minutes stretch into years, survival turns into a question of fate rather than distance. Designed by Mobius, the universe unfolds with striking clarity. Flowing robes, impossible cities, and alien ecosystems feel deliberate and lived in rather than abstract. The animation is smoother and more kinetic than Laloux's earlier work, allowing moments of genuine suspense as the boy evades predators and environmental threats. The rescue mission grows increasingly strange. Each stop introduces new ideas. Collective consciousness. Beings that exist outside linear time. Revelations that quietly reshape everything the audience assumes about the journey. The structure recalls a science fiction fable, where every encounter both teaches and endangers. Though it never achieved the cult status of Fantastic Planet, this remains a crucial chapter in Laloux's filmography. More accessible, more narrative-driven, yet still steeped in cosmic melancholy, it stands as proof that animated science fiction can wrestle with time, loss, and inevitability, without sacrificing wonder. Fantastic Planet, 1973. On a distant planet, towering blue humanoids known as drags treat humans, called Oms, as curiosities, pets, or pests. What begins as quiet observation slowly mutates into rebellion, as the Oms steal knowledge and organize resistance. The result is science fiction stripped of comfort, operating as allegory, nightmare, and meditation all at once. Roland Topor's designs ensure nothing ever feels familiar. The drags move with serene, shark-like grace, while the world around them crawls with impossible life. Plants that devour, creatures that pulse, landscapes that seem alive and hostile. Cutout animation exaggerates the uncanny, making even simple gestures feel unnatural. Paired with Alain Goraguer's drifting jazz score, the film sustains a hypnotic unease from beginning to end. The political subtext is deliberate and unavoidable. Oppression here is casual, systemic, and justified through perceived superiority. The Om's evolution from pets to revolutionaries mirrors cycles of colonization and resistance, but Laloux avoids lectures. Meaning accumulates through imagery, repetition, and discomfort rather than exposition. Though its American release was limited, the film found longevity through midnight screenings and college circuits, championed by audiences searching for animation that challenged rather than soothed. Decades later, it remains defiantly alien, a vision that still refuses to soften its edges. Gandahar, aka Light Years. 1987. A crystalline civilization built on harmony and biological intelligence faces an impossible threat. Metallic invaders who transform living beings into stone. What begins as a defensive war soon reveals itself as something far more destabilizing, a conflict rooted in time itself, where cause and effect fold back into paradox. Designed by Kaza, the world unfolds with Art Nouveau elegance. Organic architecture curves and breathes, suggesting a society shaped by evolution rather than industry. This makes the arrival of the metal men especially jarring. Their rigid mechanical forms slice through the frame, visually embodying the clash between nature and cold futurism. Even dialogue-heavy moments remain hypnotic, carried by the richness of the designs. The narrative grows increasingly ambitious. Time travel is not a gimmick here, but the core dilemma, looping history back on itself and reframing heroism as responsibility rather than conquest. An English-language release attempted to repackage the film with familiar names, but the original French version preserves its ambiguity and philosophical weight. This final feature never found a wide audience, slipping between art house obscurity and mainstream indifference. Yet, as Leloux's closing statement, it feels fitting, beautiful, intellectually restless, and quietly unsettling, a meditation on utopia that refuses easy answers. Son of the White Mare, 1981. This feels less like watching a film and more like absorbing folklore directly into the nervous system. A hero's journey unfolds through animation that never settles. Forms morph mid-motion, colors pulse with symbolic intent, and no image remains static long enough to become comfortable. Born from a magical horse, Fearlofia descends into the underworld alongside his brothers to rescue princesses from monstrous dragons. The story itself is ancient, familiar across countless mythologies. What makes this singular is how it's told. Marcel Jankovic strips away realism entirely, replacing it with flat planes of color, symmetrical geometry, and folk art patterns that carry narrative meaning. Shapes become emotion. Color becomes destiny. The underworld grows increasingly abstract, each descent shedding another layer of the recognizable until the film operates almost entirely on archetype. The three-headed dragon sequence pushes into hypnotic territory. Writhing forms, clashing hues, motion so relentless it borders on trance. Georgi Vukan's electronic score mirrors the visuals, amplifying the sensation of ritual rather than spectacle. After its original Hungarian release and festival recognition, the film largely vanished from international view. Recent restorations have brought renewed attention, but its radical commitment to myth and abstraction keeps it defiantly uncommercial. There's no compromise here. Just 86 minutes of pure symbolic cinema, animated as if for the gods rather than an audience. The Pied Piper, 1986. Gigi Barta's adaptation of the Grimm tale is carved from wood, literally. Every character is a puppet, every building a gnarled wooden construction. The rats spread plague, the townspeople's greed is grotesque, and the piper's revenge is as horrifying as the original story demands. This isn't a sanitized fairy tale. It's a nightmare brought to life in stop motion. The wooden puppets carry the texture and grain of real carved figures, their movement uncanny and mesmerizing. Rat swarms move with eerie synchronization, and the piper's music compels action through subtle shifts in animation, rather than dialogue. Mikhaila Pavlodova's haunting score amplifies the atmosphere, letting sound and movement tell the story. The children's disappearance is depicted with dreamlike inevitability. Moral ambiguity pervades the film. The townspeople are guilty, the universe indifferent, and innocence is fragile. Minimal dialogue keeps attention on the craft and the chilling visual narrative. Though it toured international festivals and won awards for its animation, the film never achieved wide release. Its painstaking stop-motion and uncompromising vision make it a work of art rather than commercial entertainment, a stark reminder that some stories resist happy endings. The Plague Dogs, 1982. Martin Rosen follows Watership Down not with another fable, but with something far more punishing. Two dogs escape an animal research facility in England's Lake District, only to find themselves hunted by authorities convinced they're carriers of bubonic plague. There's no fantasy refuge here, no safety net, just survival under constant threat. The watercolor landscapes are deceptively beautiful, rendering the countryside as vast, cold, and indifferent. These animals are not anthropomorphized mascots. They starve, they misjudge danger, and they hurt one another without meaning to. John Hurt's Snitter, brain damaged by experimentation, drifts between reality and hallucination, haunted by memories of his former owner. Rosen refuses to soften Richard Adams's critique. Scientists aren't cartoon villains, bureaucrats aren't monsters, but the system they serve is. Media hysteria amplifies fear, authority responds with violence, and compassion is always outpaced by procedure. The horror comes not from malice, but from indifference. The ending depends on which version you see. Rosen's original cut offers ambiguity bordering on despair, while the American release gestures toward comfort it hasn't earned. Either way, The Plague Dogs remains one of animation's most uncompromising works, a film that demands viewers confront what's done in the name of progress and the cost paid by those without a voice. Felidae, 1994. When Francis moves into a new neighborhood, he discovers a string of ritualistic murders among the local feline population. What begins as a simple mystery soon spirals into a dark conspiracy involving genetic experiments, eugenics, and the lingering shadow of historical atrocities. Adult, unsettling, and uncompromising, the film proves that animation can tell stories as intelligent as they are disturbing. Akif Pirinči's source novel provides intricate plotting that respects the audience's intelligence. The cats speak to each other in human language, but they remain cats, driven by territory, survival, and desire. Francis's investigation leads him through the city's underbelly, fighting pits, breeding labs, and archives documenting sinister experiments. The stakes feel real because Shaq's animation combines rotoscoped realism with expressive character work, making every victim's fate resonate. The murder sequences are horrifying not for shock alone, but because the film builds genuine emotional investment. Violence is personal, calculated, and unnerving. The tone is dark throughout, reflecting both the crimes and the world that allows them to continue. Voice performances, in German and the English dub, anchor the story, even when the content stretches comfort zones. Felidae struggled for distribution outside Europe, hitting home video only years later. Yet, it has since been rediscovered by adult animation fans, mystery lovers, and anyone drawn to intelligent, uncompromising storytelling. It's a reminder that animation can explore horror, crime, and moral complexity in ways live action rarely achieves. If you love discovering forgotten horror and cult cinema, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the films time forgot. Thanks for watching. And remember, always be kind and rewind, because every movie is someone's favorite.